Georgia lawmakers are back under the gold dome, and one of the early education issues already gaining some traction, whether the state should expand its student cell phone ban to include high schoolers. This could impact hundreds of thousands of Georgia students, also teachers and families as well. Supporters say it really does keep kids focused. Critics say it raises some real-world concerns. So joining us to talk about it, someone we have here often is Verdelia Turner, president of the Georgia Federation of Teachers. Glad to have you on. All right, we know this is a hot topic. A lot of people have a lot of opinions. So let's start with the big question. This state ban, if it does go into effect, is it something you think that school districts should be deciding, or should the state really get involved?
Happy New Year and good morning. And yes, the state should get involved. And in fact, research already confirms what practitioners already know, that there are positive effects by banning cell phones in terms of student engagement, student interaction, concentration, retention of materials, and also it actually cuts down on bullying, because a lot of bullying is done with cell phones. But studies that also indicate that students perform better on tasks, and that requires sustained attention when cell phones are out of sight, because there are a lot of unintended consequences to cell phones. And let me say this, we are also parents, and this is not rocket science, and this is one bill that should be passed unanimously.
We'll see if it is, but obviously, Verdelia, there is another side to this. You have those people who say, hey, there are real world school safety concerns. We hear about school violence, school shootings, and parents and even some students feel that they should have direct access to their cell phones.
Well, feeling and knowing and doing are two different things. There are 75 million people in schools, from universities to all the way to pre-K every day. Last year in this country, we had about 221 shootings, and that's less than 0.0003%. But the United States itself has more gun ownership per person than any other country. There are 120 guns per 100 people. Now, we know screen time is here to stay. So we're gonna have to be limited with what we do, limited with what we see, limited in terms of how we use technology and cell phones. And that goes for parents also, because students are receiving messages constantly and consistently, even outside of the classroom, that affects their behavior.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think most would agree with that. Okay, so we know that this will be a topic under the Gold Dome. We will likely hear from teachers and parents, but what about students? Should they have any say in how this policy is shaped?
Well, I'm old time. I think adults should have more say so. Students have a lot of say so and a lot of lack of experience. We appreciate their input, but students can't run schools, and students should not run adults.
In terms of enforcement, though, if this passes, like I said, we know some districts have already chosen to ban cell phones across the board. But if this becomes a state law, is it ultimately up to teachers, the administrators, or in some cases, school police to enforce this? Like, whose job is it?
It's going to fall on the schools and the state, with the state helping to train. But I want to say something about safety in schools, because our state did put forth more funds in safety, and schools were doing what they could. We have video surveillance, and we have trained security personnel. There are actually mechanisms when you come through the door. Nothing is fail-proof. You can always get through with anything. But our entryways, our parking lots, our corridors are better protected. And there are emergency buttons, and schools are coming up to par. And of course, they're going to need probably more funding, more students, more violence, more funding. We want to keep our students as safe as possible, and our staff as safe. But violence in the United States is something that everyone's going to have to come to grip with. The problem happens to be, and it's a whole different subject.
We are less than 4 weeks away until the world comes together in northern Italy for the Winter Olympics, and many of America's finest athletes are finishing their training for the games. Among them is Team USA biathlete Chloe Levins. She's balancing peak performance with building skills she's looking for in the next chapter of her career. And we are so glad to have Chloe joining us this morning. Chloe, welcome. You are in the final stretch of Olympic prep. What does a typical day look like for you right now? You're so close.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm here in Munich. I've been competing for a couple months already on the road. I've done 20 competitions, and yeah, the sport of biathlon is grueling. It's a test of both physical and mental endurance, and I feel very grateful to be the Olympic alternate for Team USA this year, and I'll be ready to step in if they need me.
And so tell us, what is the one misconception you think people have about biathlon when they watch it on TV?
Oh man, I think the misconception is that the targets are the same size when they shoot in prone and standing, and they're actually very different sizes. In prone, we shoot it the size of a golf ball. The target is the size of the golf ball, and in standing, it's about the size of a grapefruit. And I think that's a big misconception.
Yeah, that's a huge shift of precision. Talk about the career which awaits you. What's your plan once competition is over? We always forget that you guys do have other parts of your life outside of your sport.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to retire from something in your late 20s or early 30s, but that's the reality we face as professional athletes. And I've been really fortunate to get to continue my education through the USOPC's partnership with Guild. And I've taken tuition-free classes as a Team USA athlete, and I'm working part-time jobs alongside my biathlon career too. And what's been really rewarding is that it wasn't more focus or more discipline that brought me to the next level, but it was actually achieving that balance. And yeah, I'm really grateful to get to do so remotely and to take classes from anywhere through the Guild programs at my disposal.
And tell us, you talk about those two things going on at the same time, right? How hard is it for you to train for the Olympics and then also get ready for a second career all at the same time?
It's definitely a lot to juggle, but I think it's worth it because not only do we not have seven-figure sponsorship deals like some of the big names in winter sport, but we also never know when our career is really going to end. I think it's a luxury to get to decide to retire, and sometimes retirement is forced upon us by an injury or an illness. So to plan for the future alongside actually gives me a great sense of reassurance. And I think that I'm able to approach my sport with a freer mind in that way.
And so if someone watching this is facing a major career reset, what would be your message to them?
Yeah, my message to them would be to stay resilient. I think that resilience in endurance sport, and also through all the obstacles that might be thrown your way, is one of the greatest traits we can all muster. I also think that staying well balanced is a key to the success that I'm having at the moment right now. I think making sure that whatever I'm doing doesn't define me, and that I have, lots of different things going on at once, helps me kind of be the healthiest at what I'm doing at any given time.
And when does biathlon competition begin, and how do you sort of feel about the team's chances of taking home a medal?
Yeah, biathlon is a special sport where we compete throughout the duration of the games. So we'll have 11 competitions for men and women combined. And U.S. Biathlon has never won an Olympic medal, and I think that we're in the best position to do so this year, so you should definitely stay tuned.
Cannabis Unity Day, a moment for advocates to spotlight where the country is and where it's heading on marijuana policy, and where Georgia also still stands apart. Federal survey estimates show close to a quarter of Georgians 12 and up used marijuana in the past year, including more than a third of young adults ages 18 to 25. And even as use is rising nationally and policy is shifting in some other states, Georgia's enforcement remains active. 2024 saw more than 10,000 total marijuana arrests, most of which were for possession. Meantime, Georgia's low THC medical program has grown to more than 27,000 registered patients, a key benchmark lawmakers and regulators use to expand dispensing capacity. While public support for legalization is growing nationwide, Georgia's laws remain among the strictest, even as medical access is slowly expanding. So let's take a look at what unity actually looks like here in Georgia with Angela Weston, co-founder of the Georgia Medical Cannabis Community and Society. Great to have you here, Angela. Thanks for joining us. So we talk about the word unity. What does cannabis unity mean for us here, particularly in Georgia?
Oh, well, cannabis unity basically is bringing together the medical cannabis community as well as the hemp community. Because people don't understand that cannabis it's one plant, Cannabis sativa L. And so the only difference is between that is the level of THC and its uses. So what we're trying to achieve here is to show our lawmakers and the community that we're all one unified group of advocates, lawmakers, hemp retailers from the medical community at large. So basically, that's the gist of what this day is really all about.
Yeah. All right. So, Angela, we know that public opinion has shifted quite a bit in recent years, but it shifted faster than state law. A lot of lawmakers, this is not a priority for them. Why not?
I think really because a number of them don't really understand. They look at it more as for recreational, as opposed to medical. Whether you're using it for medicinal purposes or what have you, everybody's considered to be a patient. That's one, if you're using this particular plant. But I just think that there's such a stigma around this plant, and that's what we actually want to eradicate, is that stigma. So really the stigma is truly what I believe is holding it back, as well as possibly ways to make it lucrative, until they find ways to make it lucrative for the state at large. That may be some hindrance as well. But I think really the lack of education is a bigger part of it.
And Angela, you talk to patients often, I'm sure. What are they telling you about some of the barriers they face today?
Well, some of the barriers that they basically face are, one, locations. Where they can actually get it. If we're talking about from dispensaries, there are not that many dispensaries that we have, especially we're talking about rural areas. So access is a large part of that. Also, the products that we have. Right now, we do not have inhalation, which is something that we're pushing for, that's really needed. And we basically have gummies and some topicals, but we need to have more than just oil. Patients need more than just oil. There are some conditions that patients may have. One's called, the initials are MCAD, where they cannot digest MCT oil, so they need something else. So it's basically expanding the program, is what patients would really like to see.
And we know lawmakers are heading back to the Gold Dome, heading back to session today. What would a realistic next step look like here in Georgia for lawmakers?
A realistic next step, for one, on the medical side, if you look on the medical side, just first looking at that, would be expansion of the program, making it more of a more robust program with reciprocity, allowing our card to be able to be utilized in other states, and also for other people who have card holders from other states to be able to come here as well, which of course will increase the revenue here. We're looking from the hemp side is basically protection for our hemp farmers, our hemp retailers. That's the largest, I would say, the largest issue right now is what's happening to the hemp retailers. After they've spent so much money building their businesses and so forth, and now the laws are changing and it's costing them money. People have put their savings into these businesses and now they're losing. So that's basically what we would like the lawmakers to be able to do.
Yeah, and I've got about 30 seconds here. So even if recreational use, as you kind of mentioned, is off the table, at least for now, do you think we have enough bipartisan support we're seeing on the medical side?
I'm hoping that we do. I'm feeling confident that we've made some headway last year with the Blue Ribbon Committee and basically advocates going out and talking about the medical side and what is needed. So I'm hoping that we really have made some headway. So I'm going to be very confident that this year we're going to be able to see some increases in the medical program.
A recent article in The Atlantic has people talking about, well, how people talk. It's called The Last Days of the Southern Drawl. Say it ain't so. It cites some recent studies that suggest young people are losing their Southern accents. I'm joined now by somebody who first raised this issue years ago. In fact, John Forrest, an associate linguistics professor at UGA. John, great to have you. You first co-authored a study back in 2023. I remember reading it at the time and reading some of the fallout at the time. Here we are 3 years later. Has anything changed with your perception of the study? I mean, what's the state of the Southern drawl today, in your opinion?
For language change and stuff like that, 2 years is not a super long time, so it's pretty much the same thing. But what I'd say basically is that the pieces of the Southern drawl are going away. A lot of the things that people think of when they think of Southern accents are gone. But I wouldn't say necessarily that, we're not sounding Southern. It's just Southern means something different nowadays than it used to.
Can you expand on that a little more? What are we losing that we once had when it came to our dialect?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're looking at is the pronunciation of particular kinds of vowels. So like vowels like in the words face, if I say face with a Southern accent, people immediately know. They're like, oh man, that sounds really Southern. A lot of that stuff is going away, but these are things that people really, really notice about the Southern accent. All accents in different areas have tons of things that make them up. Some of them we really notice, some of them we really don't. So some of the things that are a little more under the radar might be it's still kept around, but people don't pay as much attention to them. But some of these iconic things like those vowel pronunciations, like face or time for time, those are going away.
So are you saying that I'm going to now be boiling my water instead of boiling my water?
A lot of people boil their water now rather than bowling.
Okay. Hey, look, you know from being at UGA, so many kids from the north are now migrating south to go to SEC schools. I mean, it's an astounding number right now. Are you starting to see that migration having an effect on the Southern drawl?
So not that particular migration, but that's a good point to bring up. Not necessarily kids coming down to go to SEC schools, but the big thing that we've pointed to and across a number of studies by me and other people is that since like the 70s or so, a lot more people in the United States have moved to the South, right? Like all the Sunbelt cities are really big. They're growing more and more every year. And that migration in brings a lot of people who sound different than people in the South used to. When you have a bunch of people together like that, accents often change. It's what we call like dialect contact. So when people are around a lot of other things, they have ways that they might want to sound that are different than the traditional Southern accent. And that's a big impetus for a lot of the stuff that we see changing right now.
Is that the same idea as code switching? Like how I might sound on air right now is going to be a little different from how I sound breaking bread with my family in Savannah over the weekend.
It's related for sure, right? Like we know that like there are different ways to sound with different people, and that like sometimes it can be like friendly or like with my family, I might want to sound and have a Southern accent, but sometimes people are like, hey, you know, if I'm in a professional setting, this may not be taken seriously, which is not a good thing, but is probably a true thing. And so people will code switch there, and that is some of the motivation for why somebody might want to say, hey, maybe I don't want to have certain kinds of accents ever, not just, you know, in professional settings.
Look, I remember when your study dropped a few years ago. I was actually living in Virginia at the time, and we were talking about it on TV there. Are you surprised with sort of the widespread interest in this topic?
Yeah, you know, yes and no. Maybe quite as big as it is. That was a little surprising, but like often for those of us who study dialects and accents, people are naturally curious about this stuff. Every time I present my research, people are like, oh, this is really neat. I want to ask you questions about my family or where I'm from. And I think it's part of who we are. So that part, not surprising. I think it's really natural for people to care. For national news to pick it up, a little less common, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, accent is part of our identity. What do you think is lost when we lose the accent that, you know, we've had for generations?
Yeah, it can be losing something, right? Like, I think accent is tied to identity, but it is always changing, right? Like, I sort of open with saying, like, we're reforging what the South means, because the changing of the accent is not necessarily a loss, but a reinterpretation of what the South is and what it could be. But we don't want to say, hey, well, this is something we shouldn't think about or keep around or record or anything like that. A lot of what linguists want to do is keep people's voices. We have lots of people's recordings who do have these Southern accents, and it's good to know like where we came from so that we know where we're moving.
Is there anything the everyday Georgian can do to try to preserve the Southern accent?
Oh, that's a great question. Preserve it. Like my take on this is always that preserve what you want to preserve about how you do things, right? Like I'll often sit down and tell people, like talk to people about like, what does it mean to you to be Southern? For some people, the accent is really important for that. For some people, it's not. For some people, it's like, well, the accent isn't it, but like, I care that I'm polite. I care that like, you know, I love sweet tea. I love biscuits. Like culture is really broad. Accent's a part of it. But keep around what you want to keep around. I know a lot of people like have picked up y'all. That's kind of grown actually. So that's definitely a piece of the South that feels like it can be maintained, is sort of, it's got a new second life where it's stronger even outside the South. So that's one thing for sure.
New details in the deadly disturbance at Washington State Prison in East Georgia. The Department of Corrections says the fight involved gang-affiliated inmates. This all happened at the Washington State Prison in Davisboro, Georgia, a medium security facility about 130 miles southeast of Atlanta. Authorities now say this disturbance started on a sidewalk inside the prison and was brought under control by staff late Sunday afternoon. Officials have confirmed the names of the 3 men who died: 23-year-old Ahmaud Hatcher, 42-year-old Jimmy Trammell, and 27-year-old Teddy Jackson. Trammell was scheduled to be released from prison within days before the incident. 13 inmates were taken to local hospitals, and 1 corrections officer suffered non-life-threatening injuries. As staff deployed non-lethal weapons to regain control, Washington State Prison remains on lockdown today while the GDC leads an active investigation into the cause and really the dynamics of this disturbance. With more on the issues surrounding prison security, let's welcome Marcus Snipes. He's a former U.S. Secret Service agent in charge and current head of security for our parent company, Tegna. We thank you for being here with us this morning. When you hear that 3 inmates were killed in one incident, what does that immediately tell you just about the severity of this situation?
I mean, if anyone that loses a life in a disturbance inside a prison, it's very, very, very serious. That's the last thing those prison officials want to see. They've set up all sorts of protocols and structures and standards so that this does not occur. This is one of those worst case scenarios. And when you're talking about the number of inmates that have been injured and killed, that's a major deal for a prison or any type of facility. It's just tragic, and I'm sure going forward, they're going to look at the mistakes. If there were mistakes, they're going to look at some after action, points that they could have taken, and they'll try to improve on their training and their emergency protocols as a result of this incident.
And so a lot of people may, hear this story. You think of a lot of the TV shows, based in prisons, but this was clearly a real life. My first thought was, if these people died, were they beaten to death during the fights? Were there shanks involved in the prison? Things of that nature, like how severe was it? But for viewers at home who are just familiar with gang activity in general, how do the organized gangs inside a prison facility compare to those on the outside?
It's a very good question. The gang element inside an institution, they are way closer, the word I would use is more intimate, because they're there every day amongst each other. They form these groups, these cliques. They're factions. They have to be loyal, really loyal to their particular gang and their particular group. Otherwise, they face consequences that comes along with gang-related activity. So the gangs or people associated with gangs that are incarcerated tend to be more loyal, more willing to go above and beyond to prove their loyalty, and you get that mixed with another rival gang or just innocent inmates that are caught in the middle. And yes, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, for sure, because when you think about it inside, who you're clicked up with is really your means of survival. But, sometimes you think that the officers can sort of see that this is coming or what's happening. Does this incident suggest a breakdown in security, or does it show how dangerous these environments just are naturally?
I think this incident probably was a result of, could have been months, weeks, days of just animosity between 2 inmates, each belonging to a different gang. and this thing could fester and involve another inmate, and before you know it, hey, you've got a group of 5 to 10 inmates that are ready to go at it with another group of inmates. So that's how these things kind of develop. And I think going forward, one of the after action points will be, hey, our training, our guards, if they're trained to recognize, these actions.
The U.S. Capitol, where Congress is scrambling over whether and how to revive health care insurance subsidies that millions of Americans rely on. So here's where we stand right now this morning. The U.S. House passed a bipartisan bill extending Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium tax credits, which expired at the end of 2025. The extension would run for 3 years. So now the Senate will haggle over the size, the length, and conditions of any extension, but President Trump has signaled that may be a veto, a standalone extension of the ACA subsidies. This all comes ahead of Thursday's big deadline to sign up for 2026 health coverage through the Affordable Care Act marketplaces. A lot to get to this morning, so for a look at what lies ahead, we have Dr. Catherine Hempstead joining us this morning, Senior Policy Advisor with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Hempstead, great to have you here with us this morning to sort this out. So let's start with this question. When people hear that Congress is still talking about this, debating, what do they actually do? Should they rush to enroll, just maybe wait this out, or walk away altogether?
Well, if you need coverage and you don't have another source of health insurance coverage, you definitely should not wait this out, because in Georgia, open enrollment is going to end, as you mentioned, on Thursday. So people should go out there and and choose a plan, and maybe in the short run sort of take the conservative assumption that they're not going to fix this problem, and that the higher premiums that people see when they go look at the plans are what they're going to face for the year. And that's a situation that's really unfortunate for a lot of people, and leads them to have higher costs. And some people deal with that by choosing a lower metal value plan, like going to a bronze plan instead of a silver plan, because then at least you might have a more manageable premium, even though your out-of-pocket costs are going to be higher. But it's important for people to know that the coverage there is exactly the same in terms of what's covered. It's just a question of sort of how you're financing the trade-off between your premiums and your out-of-pocket expenses.
Absolutely. Dr. Hempstead, what kind of confusion does this create? It's a lot of uncertainty for families who are trying to figure out what to do right now in the meantime.
Oh, it's so confusing for consumers. I really think it's heartbreaking, because I think a lot of people might actually think that there are no tax credits at all right now, because they keep hearing about tax credits expiring. But in fact, the original ACA tax credits are still in place, and they do make coverage far more affordable than it would be otherwise. But these enhanced tax credits that made plans even more affordable, and also gave some relief to those consumers who earned more than 400% of the federal poverty limit. Those are the component of the tax credits that are expiring. But that's a lot to digest. And I think for people who are just kind of hearing this out of the side of their ear when they're going around and living their life, this is a lot to sort of take in and understand. So I think it unfortunately might make a lot of people feel like they just should not even look at the marketplace. But in fact, there are still tax credits there. I think there's a decent chance that Congress is going to come up with something. And if that's the case, I would assume that people would have the opportunity to go back into the marketplace and choose a different plan. And then I think a lot of people would go back to a silver or a gold if they had a more affordable premium. So I think if anyone needs coverage, they should go to the marketplace. Georgia has its own state-based marketplace this year. Go to the marketplace, choose coverage, hope for the best, maybe buy down to bronze. But it's a really important financial protection, even if the out-of-pocket exposure on a day-to-day basis is more than you would have liked if you could have had a more affordable premium.
All right, Dr. Hempstead, before we go, we got like 20 seconds. For someone who hasn't enrolled yet, what's the main thing they need to know right now?
Well, I think the main thing they need to know is that open enrollment ends Thursday. The second thing they need to know is all the plans cover the same services. So they need to look at the provider network, the formulary, and try to get the combination of premium and out-of-pocket costs that's most manageable for them, you know, with the caveat that it's not as affordable as it was last year.
All right, let's talk Olympic Games. It's so hard to believe it's been 30 years since the Summer Olympics came here to Atlanta. It's a moment the Atlanta History Center celebrates each day. But tonight, you'll have a unique opportunity to hold that tradition in your hands. Let's welcome John Schmidt, Communications Coordinator for the Atlanta History Center. John, why was hosting the Olympics such a turning point for Atlanta as a city?
Well, it was the first time, one of the first times Atlanta really went on a global scale. In 1990, when we were bidding for the Olympic Games, we were seen as a bit of an underdog. It was the Centennial Games were scheduled for 1996. The first Games was held in Athens. Many were expecting it to be hosted there. Vancouver was also in consideration. But a group of Atlanta partners in both the public and business and private space came together with a vision for what the Olympics could be in Atlanta and how it could change this city. And they convinced the IOC, and with it, they changed Atlanta.
What do people often forget or never realize about just how big the games were for our city?
I think people don't quite understand the extent to which it remains here today. Many of our buildings were built for the sole purpose of supporting upcoming athletic competitions in the Olympic Games. Georgia Tech Stadium, one of Georgia Tech's Coliseums, was built for the Olympic Games. Centennial Olympic Park is a landmark today that was, as the name implies, built for the Olympic Games. And that's what our exhibit, Atlanta 96, Shaping an Olympic and Paralympic City, really does. It takes you through what led to the Olympics to come to Atlanta, how it was developed, how it's shaped, and how it still impacts everyone today.
Talk about the exhibit. You guys have something really cool happening at the History Center. What are a couple of standout artifacts or stories visitors can connect with?
Yeah, so tonight we're going to be hosting an event centered on that exhibit. It's called History on the Rocks Atlanta 96. After the Olympic Games, the Atlanta History Center was designated as the official repository for the Georgia Amateur Athletic Foundation, which was the committee behind organizing the games. And we use those artifacts every day to help encourage visitors to learn about how the Olympics shape us. The Olympics coming to Atlanta shapes Atlanta today, even 30 years later. For tonight, for one night only, we're going to be hosting an event centered on that exhibit, allowing people to look back and have some additional deaccessioned artifacts that people will be able to hold in their hands, not just see it behind a case, be able to hold an authentic 1996 Olympic torch. You'll be able to see a podium. And we think that hands-on activation with this sort of throwback to the 90s will allow people to get immersed in it just in time for 2026 in Milan Cortina.
How does the exhibit just balance the excitement of the games with the lasting impact they had on neighborhoods and infrastructure in our community?
It's really the interactivity component of the exhibit that allows you to do that. So we're able to show you not just the games themselves, you're able to see, and we'll have some additional footage available today, moments from the Olympics. You'll see the crowds gathering for it. You'll be able to see the moments that really defined the games themselves, but you also be able to see the behind the scenes experience. The Olympics didn't just come to Atlanta on a whim. There was a team of people, both in the public and private sector, that helped saw a vision that nobody else saw and pushed for it to make it a reality.
All right, so tell us, what makes seeing this exhibit during a social, adults-only event different from any other daytime visit?
Of course. This is part of a long-standing series we have at the History Center called History on the Rocks. We have a beautiful 33-acre campus. And we activate different parts of it during the night to give you sort of a next-level experience with it. So as we're starting off this year, we figured what would be the best way to do that with a throwback to the 90s, right, with Milan Cortina around the corner. So we'll have a little mini museum Olympics, the chief of which will be testing your mental gymnastics with our 20-question trivia quiz. We'll have moments for photo opportunities with that torch. Everyone will get a chance to hold the torch and pose with the podium. You'll get exclusive late-night access to the exhibit, and your ticket comes with a drink ticket redeemable at our credit card bar for our specialty cocktail, the Atlanta 96.
Former President Bill Clinton is facing potential contempt of Congress charges after refusing to comply with a House subpoena tied to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. In a letter released on social media, the Clintons slammed the House oversight probe as legally invalid. Committee Chair James Comer says the subpoena was approved unanimously and with bipartisan support, and that Clinton's failure to appear leaves the committee with little choices.
This subpoena was voted on in a bipartisan manner by this committee. This wasn't something that I just issued as chairman of the committee. This was voted on by the entire committee in a unanimous vote of the House Oversight Committee to subpoena former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton's supposed to show up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. But with respect to the former president, he did not show up today.
All right, so let's get some context on what this all means in this headline with noted defense attorney and former Fulton County District Attorney, Assistant DA Daryl Cohen. Daryl, always good to have you on with us this morning. Let's start with this. Does refusing to testify automatically mean that someone, in this case the Clintons, would be in contempt?
It means that it's setting off a series of actions over which someone may not have control. Predictably unpredictable. If the president, former President Clinton, chooses not to show up, then there's several alternatives. Congress can ignore it. They're not going to, in my view. B, they can turn it over to the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to prosecute it where it's a misdemeanor, and the Department of Justice may or may not decide to continue that prosecution, or they could have a civil contempt. And if it's civil contempt and the president, the former President Clinton, chooses not to do anything, I'm going to ignore it. You're coming after me. You have no valid reason to come after me. Then in a civil contempt action, when it's in front of a judge, that judge can say, you've got to testify. And if you choose not to, we're going to find you in contempt. And they can incarcerate him, for heaven's sakes. Mm-hmm. This is just so much about nothing. I mean, Epstein was major, but isn't it time to let it go?
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. Well, Daryl, we're talking about a former president here. Obviously, this is in part why this is making headlines. But if this were a private citizen, perhaps, would the process, you feel, be any different?
It would be different in that the private citizen, regardless of who he or she was, would be likely more fearful of what could happen. And so they would more likely comply. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be found in contempt. So I'm going to testify and I'm going to tell the truth, whatever the truth is.
You mentioned that a judge, kind of has some leeway to decide what to do here. But is jail time actually something that we could see here, or do you think that's unlikely?
I think it's unlikely, but it's certainly on the table, and it's enough on the table where the Clintons actually mentioned that yesterday, that they just want to see us incarcerated. And all of this is so political and so real and so unreal. You just want to take a decision and say, I'll pick that one, or I'll pick this one, or I'll pick them all. It's something that needs to stop, in my view. It needs to be done. Let's move on. Epstein committed horrible crimes and ruined the lives of so many young girls, but he's dead.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like, Daryl, that this is going to move on, at least not anytime soon. So if you were former President Clinton's attorney, putting on your legal hat that you have, what would you say to him? What would your advice be to Bill Clinton?
My advice would be, let's reach out to the committee. Let's see if we can negotiate a limited number of questions, and that way everyone will look good, or if not good, no one will look bad.
All right.
And I don't want to put you in harm's way, Mr. President.
Okay, so let's go back here a little bit. What happens usually after a contempt referral is made? What's the next step?
It can be, again, one of two ways. It can be contempt in terms of contempt of Congress, and they want to prosecute the person, in this case, the former president. And if that be the case in a criminal action, it would be turned over to the Department of Justice, who makes a decision. They don't have to prosecute him, but the DOJ may, and if they do, then there's a possibility the president could be found in contempt criminally. And if that's the case, the former president is facing incarceration time up to a year, $100,000 fine, not nothing, or they could go ahead and go the civil route and be in front of a judge and ask the judge to please find him in contempt because he's failing to comply with a lawful subpoena from Congress. And if that be the case, then the judge, if the judge decides that the president needs to, the former president needs to, must testify because he is under subpoena, then if he doesn't testify, the judge can find him in contempt.
30 years ago, Janet Evans helped define a moment, carrying the Olympic flame through the streets of Atlanta and into Olympic Stadium. The torch relay ended with the swimmer running up a flight of stairs and passing the flame to the greatest, Muhammad Ali, who then lit the Olympic cauldron. The 1996 Olympic Games also marked Evans' final Olympics, capping a career that included 4 gold medals and 1 silver medal. And now she is helping shape the future of the Olympic movement, serving as Chief Athlete Officer for the upcoming 2028 Summer Olympics and Paralympic Games, which will be held in Los Angeles. And we're so honored to have the Olympic legend with us this morning, Janet Evans, joining us. Good morning to you, Janet.
Good morning, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's go all the way back to 1996, some 30 years ago, that moment that we just showed our viewers, you carrying the torch, then handing it off to Muhammad Ali. You think back to that moment, what did it feel like all those years ago?
It was hands down my greatest Olympic moment. Atlanta is an incredible Olympic city. My memories from that evening are strong, but I think what the Atlanta Organizing Committee did on that evening by having Muhammad Ali light the cauldron showed to all of us the Olympic spirit, but also that we can do and be anything we want. We just got to show up. And so one of the greatest Olympic moments, I believe, when he lit that cauldron in Olympic history, and I was proud to be a part of it. So it's always great to speak to everyone in Atlanta and such amazing memories.
Yeah, and Atlanta was special for you in particular because this was your final Olympic Games. So did that feel like a full circle moment back then?
It was my final Olympic Games, and there was nothing like competing at home, right? And I'm a California kid, but to be in Atlanta felt like home. The fans and the locals and all the people in the stands made it feel like home. And to look in the stands and see American flags everywhere, and very Team USA oriented. And I think it's any athlete's dream at the Olympic or Paralympic level to finish their career or actually compete on home soil. And so the greatest news is we get to do that again here in Los Angeles in 2028. And we're very excited to carry the mantle from what Atlanta did for the movement back in 1996 and continue that goodwill coming up in 28 in just a couple of years.
Yeah, it's so exciting. So you mentioned that we're getting ready already for the 2028 Games in LA. What excites you the most about bringing the Games back here to the U.S. for the first time in a generation? Because you have a big role now that we just talked about, where you're going to have a big hand in helping make all this possible.
Yeah, and I think it's, what we just spoke about, Jonathan. It's allowing our athletes to have an incredible experience in an incredible city that loves the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and that will have fans sitting in the stands cheering for whatever country their favorite country is and whatever favorite sport they have. And so, my role as Chief Athlete Officer is to ensure that when athletes come to Los Angeles for our Olympic and Paralympic Games, their experience is what they need. Because remember, this is the biggest day of these athletes' lives. They've trained years and years for this, and it is incumbent on us to make sure that we're giving them the right tools to compete at their best, the right stadiums to have that opportunity, the fans to cheer for them. And so, we're working hard on that in Los Angeles, and my role is to ensure that the athletes have a great experience.
Yeah, and I know you've also been a big proponent of making sure the tickets are accessible and somewhat affordable, because I read that you actually got inspired to be what you are by going to the Olympics back years ago in LA. So this is kind of a full circle to be back in LA.
I did. I was 12 years old when the Olympics came to Los Angeles, so I'm dating myself. And I was able to go. My parents got tickets, and it inspired me to become an Olympian. It made me want to go to swim team. It made me want to work harder. And the great thing about the Games, though, is that you don't have to dream about being an Olympic swimmer. You can dream about being, a civil servant or a doctor or a lawyer, whatever you want to be, right? And I think that's why we love the Olympics and Paralympics, because it inspires generations not just to be athletes, but to be the best that they can be. And so for me, having accessible tickets for everyone here in Los Angeles is a really important part of what we're doing to introduce fans to new sports, to allow fans to watch their favorite sports, and to make the Olympics and Paralympics available for anyone who wants to be here in person.
That is so important. And ticket registration opens today. What do fans need to know right now?
Yes, so today ticket registration opens on our website, tickets.la28.org. You can register anytime between today and March 18th. And so it's like sending in your RSVP to the wedding, right? And then once we receive that, we will have random ticket draws where you will be assigned timing for that ticket draws starting in April. So once you register, we have your information. We'll be contacting everyone about their time to buy tickets and randomized slots, and tickets will continue to go on sale as the months progress. We are having over 1 million tickets priced at $28, and a third of our tickets will be priced under $100. So we really do want to make this available for everyone at any price point to see the sports that they really want to see.